If you are here, that means you bought my Tallulah hat pattern and you are ready to sew it. First off, thank you for purchasing my pattern. Your support means everything to me. Second, so much hard work went into this to perfect the fit and make it exactly what I wanted it to be. So thank you for your patience and I hope you love it. So let's get sewing. First, you will need to measure your head. So where you're going to measure it is right around where the hat would sit. So about middle of your forehead. So my forehead is 22 inches. And if you're using the kids hat pattern, you do the same thing. This is the file that you get printed at a copy shop so that you don't have to assemble it and you can put it all on one sheet. And these lines are the different sizes. So I printed this out in black and white, but it will be color graded. So you can see up here, there's a little size guide, and then you just cut out the line that your size is over here. My head is 22 inches, so I'm going to do the smallest size. And when cutting out your pattern pieces, you need to make sure to use scissors that are designated for paper. Do not use your fabric scissors as it will dull them. Here is my fabric, and I'm going to cut the brim first because it is a cut 4 on fold. And I'm going to roll my fabric up 4 times so that I can just get it all cut out at once. And then this indicates that you are going to be cutting on the fold. And on pattern pieces, it shows you how many you need to cut. So you need to cut 4 on the fold of your main. And the reason you need to do 4 of your main is because you can fold the brim up. So you want it to be the same fabric as your main fabric. And then you also need to cut 4 of interfacing. All right, so now I'm going to start cutting. And the seam allowance for this pattern is included. You do not need to add any seam allowance. And remember to be conscientious of grain line when cutting out. This arrow is going to be your grain line. So that means I need to make sure this is going up and down. Then on these pattern pieces, you'll see that it says cut 1 on fold of main, 1 of lining, 1 of interfacing. And your lining can be different than your main fabric here because this will not be seen. Your lining will only be seen on the inside. My lining pieces are cut out and I've decided to just go with a plain white 100% cotton because I wanted it to be breathable since it's going to be the lining and touching my head. Here is our pattern piece inventory. We've got our tie strap, all 4 of our brims, 2 bands of the main, 1 of the hat top. Then we have 1 lining of the hat top and 2 lining of the hat band. Then for interfacing, we have 4 pieces of interfacing, 2 interfacings for the band, and then 1 interfacing for the top. For the interfacing, I'm using a heavyweight interfacing. I usually use buckram for the brim because it's really stiff, but I cannot find it anywhere right now. So I'm just going to use this heavyweight in the meantime. I don't suggest anything lighter than heavyweight because you want the brim to be able to be stiff and be folded up well. If you did a lightweight, I think it would just remain a floppy hat. First, I like to add my interfacing to all my pieces, and I do interfacing a little bit differently than what you are told to do. I place my interfacing down on my ironing table with your right side down, so your sticky part will be facing up toward you. Then I put my pattern piece on top of it, then iron it. I just find that it doesn't bubble like that. When you do it the other way, it tends to bubble, and I could always be doing something wrong, but this is just the way I find to make it that just bubbles the least, just makes it really, really nice and clean. First, you are going to get your brim pieces and place 2 of them right sides together and repeat for the other ones as well. And then you will sew your 5/8 seam allowance on each of these sides and repeat for those other 2 pieces. Once you've sewn those seams, you will trim your seam allowance to 1/8 to 1/4. Next, you will press your seams. Next, you will take your brim and take your second piece of your brim and place them right sides together. And then you are going to pin around the entire bottom edge of the brim. And once you have done that, you're going to sew around the entire edge of this brim. All around this edge. And trim your seam allowance. Now flip your brim right side out. Press around the entire edge of your brim. Now take your band pieces and you will place them right sides together and sew these side seams, and repeat for the lining. Trim your seam allowance for both band pieces. Press your band main and your band lining. Now it's time to place your top piece to your band piece. And this can be a little bit tricky because the top is a curved edge and your band piece is more of a straight edge. You want to place the top onto the smaller top portion of the band piece because the bottom piece of the band is larger. I like to mark the halfway points on my top piece first, then pin those and match the side seams of the band so that you have a good starting point. From there, you need to put ease between every single pin when pinning around this entire edge, because there is ease within this seam to allow for the curved edge to be attached to the straight edge. If you don't put ease between those pins, you're going to have a lot of excess at the edge of your seam. So you can see here the little tiny gaps between my pins, and when you're sewing it, you will maneuver the fabric as you go and there won't be any folds. Now you just want to sew around the entire edge, and you want to just check that your fabric underneath is not bunching up at all. So you just need to do kind of a lot of maneuvering with your hands. And just kind of flattening the fabric out as much as you can. Repeat the same for the lining. Next, you will trim your seam allowance on both the main and the lining. And you do want to just trim your seam allowance instead of clipping the curves, because clipping the curves actually weakens your seam. Next, flip your top piece right side out and then put it on the edge of your ironing board, and then you can start ironing around this entire edge. You could do multiple rows of top stitching around this brim if you would like. I just like to leave it undone with the floppy sun hat style. Next, you're going to grab your brim and grab the top band connected piece, and we are going to, this is my wrong side, I just flipped it with my wrong side, and my right side is facing inside. So I'm going to take this portion and I'm going to attach it at the side seams, matching up the side seams, and pin it in place. Do that on the other side. Now you can start pinning it around this entire edge, and you do need a little bit of ease around it, just like how when we attach the top to the band, but you definitely don't need as much. You just need to kind of wiggle it around and maneuver it with your hands. Since you have 3 seams here, you want to make sure all 3 of them are matching up on the raw edge. Now you're going to sew, making sure to have no fold, so maneuvering the fabric as you sew. Now put your hat on the edge of your ironing board and iron around that seam. Next, grab your straps and fold them in half lengthwise, right sides together. And then you will sew from this bottom edge all the way along this, leaving this part open. Trim your seam allowance along the entire sewn edge. Flip your straps right side out however you please. I prefer to use these quick turners. Press your entire strap flat. Now baste your straps where the side seam is. Take your lining and put it the right side on your ironing board, and you are going to press up 5/8 of an inch on this raw edge. We are at the last step, my friends. Make sure your straps are facing outward, and you're going to take your lining piece and line up your seams. Pin your lining all around this edge and overlap it over your stitching very slightly, because you are going to stitch in the ditch. So you want to catch the edge of that fabric, but not by too much. To stitch in the ditch, you're going to stitch right in your seam right here so that it's more of a hidden stitch. You can kind of feel your seam on this other end as you go to make sure that you're catching it, and make sure to take out your pins as you go because they are on the underside. You can also, as you're going, make sure that this is over your seam a little bit so that it catches. This is the finished hat, and you can flip the brim down as well for more sun coverage.